now, and that gives full meaning to the old adage, one man's freedom ends where another man's begins. And this must lead us not only to proceed with the greatest of caution as parliamentarians so as not to set a precedent, but also to the greatest rigor in order to live up to the increasingly fragile trust that citizens have in their democratic institutions. What is at issue here is not the idea or interpretation that some people may have of democracy or freedom. We saw in the streets for 23 days, and in many countries around the world throughout history, you can do many things and say many things in the name of freedom and democracy, but in a state that is governed by the rule of law in a so-called free and democratic society, the legitimacy of state power in its relationship to citizens must be guided and measured based on one essential question, and that must be answered in order to prevent the abuse of power. What are the limits of state interventions? My questioning is only motivated by the desire to understand the need to proclaim this law. I would emphasize that this is an extraordinary law which was drawn up in 1988 to replace the War Measures Act and to ensure that never again will the executive, any government of any color, would invest in itself the absolute power to trample on rights and freedoms for political purposes and commit abuses of power with impunity. Yes, this is not the same law, that's clear. And I would say that it's not the same law, but it's still heavy artillery. Parliamentarians in 1988 set guidelines, and one of the essential guidelines is us, the members of Parliament. It is our duty to question the legitimacy of this law, the Emergencies Act, decreed in the conditions that we all know. That is after 21 days of wait and see. At the outset, let me point out to all those who claim to live in a dictatorship that totalitarian and dictatorial regimes rarely hold the kind of debate that we are having here today. And if this gives parliamentary democracy and representative democracy its full meaning, it also imposes upon us the duty to be worthy of this responsibility and not to fail the test of credibility. Unfortunately, the sequence of events and the absence of actions that should have been taken in relation to the siege of the federal capital do not support the validity of the orders in council. How, in fact, did we get here? The government, according to the Emergencies Act, had the responsibility to consult the provinces and to report on in order to determine why there was a national emergency situation throughout the country. 7 out of 10 prime ministers opposed the application of the law on their territory because they felt it was unnecessary, and of the 3 who agreed, 2 said they didn't need it. So what national emergency was there that applies to the entire territory to continue to claim that we must absolutely ratify the Emergencies Act? It might be useful, but we have to show that it is essential. Even the National Assembly of Quebec saw fit to distance itself from the process and to unanimously adopt a motion against the application of the Act in Quebec, and I'd like to quote it. The National Assembly is concerned about the current disturbances and at certain federal border crossings, but no emergency situation that currently justifies the use of special legislative measures exists in Quebec, and it asked the Canadian government not to apply the Emergencies Act on Quebec territory. The National Assembly, however, reiterates the importance of close collaboration between the federal government and the government of Quebec, particularly to ensure the peace and security of the people of the